The war between humanity and the Velthari Empire was never meant to reach the throne world. Humans were new to the galaxy, younger than most spacefaring races, and far weaker in numbers and technology. The Velthari had ruled their region of space for thousands of cycles, led by an immortal queen whose name alone caused entire systems to surrender without a fight. When the border conflict began, most alien powers expected humanity to fall quickly and quietly. They were wrong about many things. The human strike force was small, sent only to delay the Velthari advance and evacuate civilians from nearby colonies. The mission failed. Velthari warships descended like black storms, cutting through human defenses with ruthless precision. By the end of the battle, most of the human soldiers were dead or missing. Only wreckage remained drifting in space. One human survived. His name was Elias Ward, a ground soldier from Earth's United Defense Forces. His armor was shattered, his rifle useless, and his body badly wounded when Velthari troops found him buried under the ruins of a command bunker. They expected resistance. Instead, they found a man barely conscious, clutching a broken communicator and whispering the names of his squadmates. They took him alive. Capturing a human soldier was rare. Killing them was easier. The Velthari commanders decided to present him to their queen as proof of victory. A symbol, a warning. The throne world of Veltharis Prime was unlike anything Elias had ever imagined. Massive spires rose into the sky like blades, glowing with cold blue light. The air was heavy, filled with a strange hum that seemed to vibrate through his bones. He was dragged through endless halls by armored guards, his hands bound, his wounds untreated. Every step sent pain through his body, but he forced himself to stay upright. He would not kneel. The queen's throne chamber was vast and silent. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting the towering figure seated at the far end. Queen Zalara of the Velthari did not move as Elias was thrown to the ground before her. She was taller than any human, her form elegant and terrifying at the same time. Her eyes glowed faintly, ancient and sharp, like stars that had watched civilizations rise and fall. She had seen countless prisoners brought before her, warriors, kings, rebels. All of them broke in the end. "Human," the queen said, her voice echoing through the chamber without effort. "You stand before the ruler of this empire. Look upon me." Elias lifted his head slowly. Blood ran down his forehead, blurring his vision, but he forced his eyes open. He looked at her, not with hatred, not with fear, just tired determination. The Velthari nobles lining the chamber murmured. Humans were supposed to tremble. This one did not. "Your kind attacked our borders," the queen continued. "Your fleets burned, your soldiers died. You are alone. Do you understand your position?" "Yes," Elias said quietly. The queen leaned forward slightly. "Then kneel." Elias took a slow breath. His legs shook, barely holding him up, but he did not bend. "I can't do that." A sharp sound echoed as one of the guards struck him with the butt of a weapon. Elias collapsed to one knee, coughing, but he did not lower his head. "I won't kneel," he repeated. Silence followed. The queen studied him closely. She could hear his heart racing, feel the weakness in his body, sense how close he was to death. And yet there was something else. Resolve, not arrogance, not pride, something deeper. "Why?" she asked. Elias swallowed. "Because if I kneel here, then everything we fought for means nothing." A Velthari noble laughed openly. "Your species is already defeated. Meaning is irrelevant." Elias turned his head toward the voice. "You think losing a battle means we're done. You don't understand humans." The guards raised their weapons, but the queen lifted a hand. They froze. "Explain," she said. Elias hesitated, then spoke, his voice rough but steady. "We fight because we choose to, not because we're stronger, not because we always win, but because someone has to stand up when things go wrong." The queen's eyes narrowed. "And you believe standing here, broken and alone, changes anything?" Elias looked back at her. "Maybe not today, but it tells my people who we are." For the first time in many cycles, Queen Zalara felt something unfamiliar: curiosity. She gestured and medical drones floated forward, sealing Elia's worst wounds, not healing him fully, just enough to keep him alive. "Take him to the holding cells," she ordered. "I wish to observe him." The nobles were shocked. A human should have been executed immediately, but none dared question the queen. Elias was dragged away, barely aware of what was happening. He expected pain, torture, death. Instead, he was thrown into a small cell and left alone. The door sealed shut with a hiss. Hours passed, maybe days. Time felt meaningless. Other prisoners were held nearby, alien civilians from conquered worlds. They were weak, frightened, and starving. Elias listened to their whispers through the walls. He learned their language slowly, piece by piece. When guards brought food, Elias refused to eat until the others were fed first. The guards noticed. One cycle, alarms rang through the prison. A power conduit exploded, injuring a Velthari guard and trapping several prisoners under fallen debris. The guards hesitated, afraid of another explosion. Elias did not. Ignoring his injuries, he forced open his cell door during the chaos. He ran toward the collapsed corridor, pulling trapped prisoners free one by one. When a damaged support beam began to fall, Elias shoved the injured Velthari guard out of the way and took the impact himself. The beam crushed his shoulder. He screamed, but he did not let go. By the time reinforcements arrived, the fire was out, the prisoners were safe, and Elias lay unconscious on the floor, his body broken once again. Queen Zalara watched the recordings in silence. The human had risked his life to save enemies, to save prisoners who were not his people, to save a Velthari guard who would have killed him without hesitation. "This makes no sense," one advisor said carefully. "Humans are illogical." "No," the queen replied. "They are different." When Elias woke, he was in a medical chamber, bound but alive. The queen stood beside him, closer than before. "You should have died," she said. Elias managed a weak smile. "Yeah, I get that a lot." "Why save them?" she asked. "They are nothing to you." Elias met her gaze. "They're alive, that's enough." The queen said nothing. She turned and left, her thoughts unsettled. For the first time in her long reign, Queen Zalara did not see a conquered species. She saw a question she could not answer. And somewhere deep within the heart of the Velthari Empire, the idea of human bravery began to take root. The prison wing of the royal citadel changed after the human soldiers' actions. Guards spoke more quietly. Prisoners were treated with less cruelty. None of this was ordered openly, but the influence was real. Elias Ward remained locked in his cell, injured and watched at all times, yet something about his presence disturbed the routine of the Velthari Empire. Queen Zalara visited the observation chamber often now. She watched the human through layered energy screens as he slowly recovered. His body healed far more slowly than Velthari physiology allowed, yet he endured the pain without complaint. When medical drones approached, he thanked them, even though they were machines. When guards passed, he acknowledged them with a nod, never with fear. It unsettled her. The queen had ruled through certainty. Power was simple. Those who could dominate deserved to rule. Mercy was a tool, fear a weapon. The human did not fit into that structure. He held no power, commanded no army, yet he had shifted the behavior of those around him without force. During one cycle, a junior Velthari officer entered the prison with orders to interrogate Elias. The officer was young, newly promoted, eager to prove loyalty. He activated the energy field inside the cell, causing sharp pain through Elias' nervous system. "Speak," the officer demanded. "Tell us your military codes." Elias clenched his jaw. His hands shook, but he said nothing. The officer increased the field's strength. Elias fell to one knee, breathing hard. Queen Zalara watched from above. She had ordered the interrogation, wanting to see how far the human's bravery extended. Still, something inside her tightened. "You will gain nothing," Elias said through the pain. I don't have codes. I was infantry, we fight, we bleed, that's it. The officer struck him again. Your species is primitive. Elias looked up slowly. Maybe, but we don't hurt people just to feel strong. The officer froze, stunned by the words. Rage followed. He raised his weapon. Enough, the Queen said. Her voice echoed through the chamber. The energy field shut down instantly. The officer dropped to one knee, terrified. Leave us, she commanded. When the officer fled, silence filled the room. The Queen descended from the observation platform and entered the cell herself. The guards outside stiffened but did not interfere. Elias struggled to stand. His body was exhausted, his injuries reopened. Still, he faced her. You didn't have to stop it, he said quietly. I wanted to, the Queen replied. They studied each other in silence. The Queen noticed how thin he had become, how his uniform hung loose on his frame. He should have been dead already. Instead, he stood. Why endure this? She asked. You gain nothing. Elias exhaled slowly. I gain being myself. The answer made no sense to Velthari logic. Identity was shaped by role, caste, and command. A single soldier was nothing, and yet this one acted as if his existence mattered. You are aware your people will not come for you, the Queen said. Your fleet retreated. Elias nodded. I know. Then why continue? He looked past her toward the distant walls. Because someone might need help tomorrow. If I give up, that ends. The Queen turned away, unsettled again. She ordered his wounds treated properly this time. Word of the human spread beyond the prison. Servants whispered. Guards argued quietly. Some mocked him. Others defended him. For the first time, Velthari unity cracked, not in rebellion but in thought. That crack widened when an external threat appeared. A rival empire, the Korthal Dominion, had long waited for weakness in the Velthari throne world. When intelligence reached them that the Queen's forces were stretched thin at the border, they attacked without warning. Korthal strike fleets tore through outer defenses, landing shock troops directly into the capital districts. The Velthari capital burned. Sirens screamed through the citadel. Explosions rocked ancient structures once thought invincible. The Queen's advisors panicked. Noble houses turned on one another, each trying to secure their own safety. Queen Zalara stood in the command chamber, watching her empire bleed. They breached the inner ring, an officer reported. Royal guards are falling back. The Queen clenched her fists. Where is my honor guard? Scattered, some have fled. The word tasted bitter. As chaos spread, the prison wing lost power. Energy locks flickered. Cells opened. Elias felt the door slide open and knew what it meant. He stepped into the corridor, alarms echoing around him. Prisoners rushed past, some fleeing, some screaming. He could escape. No one would stop him. He reached an intersection and paused. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed from deeper inside the citadel. Elias turned toward the sound. Inside the throne wing, Korthal soldiers pushed forward with brutal efficiency. Velthari defenders fell back, outmatched and disorganized. The Queen herself was forced from the command chamber, retreating through side corridors with only a handful of guards. A Korthal blade struck down one of them. Another fled. Queen Zalara stood alone. She raised her weapon, knowing it would not be enough. For the first time in her long life, she felt something close to fear. Then a human voice shouted behind her, "Get down!" She turned just as Elias slammed into her, knocking her aside as a blast tore through the corridor. He rolled to his feet, grabbing a fallen Velthari weapon despite not knowing how to use it properly. "Run," he said. "I'll slow them." "You will die," the Queen said. He met her eyes. Probably. Korthal soldiers advanced, towering and armored. Elias fired wildly, forcing them to take cover. He stood in the open, shaking, bleeding, yet unmoving. The Queen did not run. She watched him stand alone against impossible odds. No orders. No hope of victory, just choice. More Velthari guards arrived, rallying around the humans' defiance. They fought harder, inspired by the sight of someone who refused to retreat. Reinforcements finally pushed the Korthal back from the inner wing. Elias collapsed. When the battle ended, the queen knelt beside the human soldier as medics rushed in. His pulse was weak, his breathing shallow. "Why?" she asked again, her voice low. "Why protect me?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because you're alive." The words struck deeper than any weapon. As he was carried away, Queen Zalara stood in the ruined corridor, surrounded by the cost of power built on fear alone. For the first time, she understood something terrifying. Human bravery was not loud. It did not demand obedience. It simply stood its ground and refused to move. Elias Ward did not wake for a long time. When he finally did, light pressed against his closed eyes, soft and warm instead of harsh and cold. Machines hummed around him, steady and calm. Pain existed, but it was distant, dulled, as if someone had placed it behind a wall. He opened his eyes slowly. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar. Smooth crystal panels glowed with a pale blue light. This was not a prison cell. He tried to move and failed. His body felt heavy, wrapped in invisible weight. "Do not move," a calm voice said. Elias turned his head slightly. Queen Zalara stood near the medical platform, her tall form still and composed. Yet something about her posture had changed. She no longer looked like a ruler watching a subject. She looked like someone guarding something fragile. "How long?" Elias asked, his voice weak. "3 cycles," the queen replied. "You were close to death." Elias exhaled slowly. Figures. Medical drones adjusted their positions, releasing gentle pulses of energy across his damaged muscles and bones. His shoulder had been rebuilt with alien materials, stronger than before, though he did not yet know it. "You should not have survived," the queen said. "Your body endured damage that would have ended most species." Elias gave a faint smile. "Humans are stubborn." The queen did not respond immediately. She watched the monitors displaying his vital signs, then finally spoke. "The Korthal have retreated for now. My empire still stands because you delayed them." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. "Good. You saved my life," she continued, "and by doing so, you forced my people to see something they were never meant to question." Elias opened his eyes again. "I didn't do it to make a point." "I know," the queen said quietly. "That is what makes it dangerous." Outside the medical chamber, the Velthari Empire struggled to regain order. Entire districts lay in ruins. Noble houses accused one another of betrayal. Soldiers whispered about the human who stood alone in the throne wing. Some spoke with disbelief, others with respect, a few with hope. That frightened the old powers. The High Council demanded Elias be executed once he recovered. They argued that the human was a symbol of weakness, that his survival undermined Velthari dominance. Fear, they insisted, must be restored. Queen Zalara listened without interruption. When they finished, she stood. "You speak of dominance," she said, her voice cold. "Yet when the Korthal struck, where were you?" Silence followed. "You hid," she continued. "You fled. A human prisoner stood his ground when my own nobles would not." One counselor hissed in anger. "You would shame our empire for an outsider." "I would save it," the queen replied. She dismissed the council. That night, assassins entered the medical wing. They moved silently, cloaked in advanced stealth fields, trained killers loyal to old Velthari doctrine. Their target was not the queen. It was Elias. They bypassed guards and drones with precision. One reached the edge of the medical platform and raised a blade of condensed energy. The blade never fell. A Velthari guard slammed into the assassin from the side, breaking the stealth field. Another guard followed, then another. Within moments, the assassins lay defeated on the floor. The guards stood over them, breathing hard. None of them had been ordered to protect the human. Queen Zalara arrived moments later. She looked at the fallen assassins, then at the guards. "Why?" she asked. One guard lowered his head. He did not run. That was enough. The queen made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Elias was no longer a prisoner. When he was strong enough to stand, he was brought before the throne again. This time there were no chains. No weapons pointed at his head, only silence. The queen descended from the throne and stood before him. "Elia's ward of earth," she said, "you are free." The words felt unreal. "You may leave Veltharis Prime," she continued, "or you may stay, the choice is yours." Elias frowned slightly. "You're just letting me go." Yes, he considered it. Home was far away. His people might believe him dead, but something here felt unfinished. "I'll stay," he said, "for now." A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. From that day forward, Elias became something new within the Velthari Empire. Not a citizen, not a soldier, a presence. He walked the lower districts, helping rebuild damaged shelters. He spoke with workers, guards, and even nobles who dared approach him. He never demanded respect, yet he earned it wherever he went. Some Velthari mocked him openly. Others watched quietly and changed. One such watcher was Commander Threx, a battle-hardened general who had lost an entire legion during the Korthal attack. He approached Elias during a training cycle, observing humans, simple combat exercises that Elias taught to interested guards. "You fight wrong," Threx said bluntly. Elias shrugged. "Probably." "You rely on trust," Threx continued. "That is a weakness." Elias looked at him. "Only if you don't deserve it." Days later, when a supply convoy was ambushed by remaining Korthal raiders, Threx followed Elias' advice instead of standard doctrine. The convoy survived. Trust spread faster than fear ever had, but not everyone accepted the change. Deep within the empire, a faction formed, Velthari, who believed the queen had been corrupted by human influence. They planned a final act to restore the old order. They would challenge Elias publicly. The arena had once been used to execute enemies of the state. Now it filled with citizens from every caste. At the center stood Elias, unarmed. Across from him stood a Velthari champion, armored and towering, wielding a heavy energy spear. "This is madness," one noble whispered. "The human will die." The queen watched from her throne, hands clenched. The duel began. The Velthari champion struck first, fast and powerful. Elias dodged, barely avoiding the spear. He did not try to overpower his opponent. He moved, adapted, endured. Again and again, the champion attacked. Again and again, Elias rose. Blood stained the arena floor. His body screamed for rest. Still he stood, not to win, to refuse to fall. Finally, the champion hesitated. In that hesitation, Elias stepped forward and knocked the spear aside. He did not strike back. He simply stood there, breathing hard, eyes steady. "I don't want to kill you," Elias said. "I just won't give up." The champion lowered his weapon. Silence crushed the arena. Then slowly, one Velthari began to strike their chest in respect. Another followed, then hundreds. The queen rose to her feet, her voice carrying across the arena. "Let this be remembered," she said. "Strength is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to stand despite it." Elias collapsed moments later, exhausted but alive. As medics rushed in, Queen Zalara looked out at her people and understood the truth at last. Human bravery was not a spark. It was a fire. And once lit, it was impossible to control. The Velthari Empire did not change overnight, but it began to bend. After the arena, Elias' ward became a name spoken across worlds. Not shouted like a war cry, not carved into monuments, but shared quietly, in workshops, barracks, and ruined streets still being rebuilt. He was not praised as a hero by official decree. He was something more difficult to ignore. Proof. Queen Zalara felt the shift every day. Her advisors no longer spoke with full certainty. Generals hesitated before issuing orders that sacrificed lives without reason. Guards questioned cruelty that once felt normal. The empire still stood, still powerful, but its foundation of fear had cracked, and cracks always spread. Far from Veltharis Prime, the Korthal Dominion watched carefully. Their retreat had not been defeat. It had been calculation. Their spies sent reports filled with confusion. A single human had changed the Velthari. The Korthal High War Council reached one conclusion: the human must die. If Elia's ward lived, the Velthari would never return to what they were. The second invasion came quietly. No grand fleet, no obvious attack. Instead, small Korthal strike groups slipped through weakened border defenses, striking communication hubs and supply lines. Entire systems went dark. Panic spread faster than truth. On Veltharis Prime, riots broke out among noble districts. Old factions accused the queen of weakness. Some openly called her rule compromised. Elias saw the unrest firsthand. He stood among workers rebuilding a collapsed transit bridge when explosions rocked the far side of the city. Smoke rose into the sky. Sirens followed. "That's not an accident," Elias said quietly. A Velthari engineer beside him looked nervous. "Korthal sabotage." Elias wiped dust from his hands. "Then we need to help." "Help," the engineer repeated. "You are not a soldier." Elias smiled faintly. "I never stopped being one." Word reached the palace quickly. Queen Zalara summoned him at once. The throne chamber felt heavier now, filled with tension instead of certainty. Maps hovered in the air, showing flashing red markers across multiple systems. "The Korthal are probing us," the queen said. "They are searching for weakness." Elias studied the maps. "They already found it." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "They're not attacking you directly," Elias said. "They're attacking trust, making people panic, making them turn on each other." Several advisors scoffed. "That is not how wars are won," one said. Elias looked at him calmly. "It is when you're afraid of what your enemy might become." Silence followed. Queen Zalara dismissed the advisors and faced Elias alone. "They want you dead," she said plainly. Elias nodded. "I figured." "You could still leave," she said. "I would arrange safe passage to human space." Elias looked at her, really looked at her. He saw not a tyrant now, but a ruler standing at the edge of transformation. "If I leave," he said, "everything we started here collapses." "You owe us nothing," the queen said. Elias shook his head. "I owe myself." That answer settled it. Queen Zalara did something no Velthari ruler had ever done. She gave a human command authority, not over fleets, not over armies, but over people who chose to follow him. Volunteers came quickly, guards, workers, even former nobles stripped of power who wanted redemption. Elias trained them simply, not as conquerors but as protectors. He taught them human principles: cover each other, never abandon the wounded, trust earned through action. The unit became known unofficially as the Standers. When Korthal assassins struck within the capital, the Standers were there. They evacuated civilians instead of chasing kills. They held corridors long enough for others to escape. They took losses, but never broke. Across the empire, Velthari citizens watched and believed. The Korthal escalated. A massive fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Velthari core territory, larger than anything seen before. Their message was simple: surrender the human or burn. Fear swept the empire like a wave. Old counselors returned to the queen, emboldened by terror. "You see," one hissed, "this is the cost of mercy." Queen Zalara listened. Then she stood. "No," she said, "this is the cost of change." She ordered the fleet to prepare for defense. The battle was unlike any before. Velthari's ships were powerful but rigid in doctrine. The Korthal exploited predictability, hammering formations with precision strikes. Losses mounted quickly. On the ground, Korthal shock troops breached multiple districts. The Standers were deployed where defenses failed. Elias fought alongside them. He was not the strongest, not the fastest, but he was always at the front, pulling others up when they fell. He took hits meant for others. He refused retreat until civilians were clear. During one brutal engagement, a Korthal-heavy unit broke through toward a power nexus that supplied half the capital. If it fell, millions would die. Velthari command hesitated. The area was already overrun. Elias did not. He led a small group straight into the fire. Explosions tore through the streets. Energy blasts lit the sky. One by one the standers fell back, wounded or killed. Elias kept moving. At the Nexus gate, only 3 remained. A Corthal commander stepped forward, towering and armored, weapon humming with lethal power. "Human," the commander said, "you are the flaw, your death ends this." Elias raised his damaged rifle, it barely functioned. "Maybe," he said, "but not today." The fight was short and brutal. Elias was thrown against the gate, armor shattered, breath knocked from his lungs. The Corthal commander advanced, confident. Then Velthari civilians emerged from cover, unarmed, afraid, but standing. They placed themselves between Elias and the enemy. The Corthal commander hesitated. That hesitation cost him. Velthari defenders surged in, driven by something new. Not orders, not fear, choice. The Nexus held. The Corthal invasion began to fail. In orbit, Queen Zalara watched reports stream in. Losses were severe, but morale was unbreakable. "Why won't they retreat?" an advisor asked. "They are dying," the Queen answered softly, "because they finally believe they matter." The Corthal fleet withdrew hours later, battered and stunned. They had faced weapons before. They had never faced unity born from courage. Elias was pulled from the rubble near the Nexus, barely conscious, bleeding heavily. Medics rushed him to the palace. Queen Zalara waited at his side again. "You keep choosing the hardest path," she said quietly. Elias smiled weakly. "Someone has to." "You may not survive another battle," she said. "Then let this one count," he replied. She placed her hand against his, an act no Velthari queen had ever shown to another being. "It already has," she said. Across the galaxy, rumors spread. The Velthari were no longer ruled by fear. They were learning something far more dangerous. They were learning from humans. And the Corthal Dominion, watching from the dark, finally understood their mistake. They had tried to destroy a symbol. Instead, they had created a legacy. The battle with the Corthal Dominion left the Velthari Empire scarred but alive. Streets were rebuilt, districts repaired, and families reunited. Yet the empire itself was not the same. Fear had lost its grip. Where once obedience came from terror, now respect and choice carried weight. And at the center of this quiet revolution stood a human soldier whose name would echo for generations: Elias Ward. Elias did not seek recognition. He did not demand power. When he returned to Veltharis Prime after the last engagement, he moved among the citizens as he always had, helping rebuild, speaking quietly with those who sought guidance, encouraging those who had lost hope. The Queen observed him closely, more than ever. Her advisors whispered that she had become too lenient, too forgiving. Some claimed Elias was undermining centuries of tradition, but she ignored them. She had learned what few rulers ever realized. True strength came from those who chose to stand, not those forced to obey. Elias was invited to the royal council once again, but this time not as a prisoner, not as a guest, but as an advisor. He walked into the council chamber with a quiet confidence. Velthari generals, noble houses, and counselors filled the room. Their eyes flicked toward him, some with suspicion, some with curiosity. "You were expected to be gone," one counselor said. "The humans rarely survive against the Velthari. You have defied every prediction." "I didn't come here to defy," Elias said simply. "I came here to help. If people stand together, they survive. That's all I know." The council remained silent. His words were not commanding, they were not threatening. They were simple, honest, and yet the weight behind them was undeniable. Outside the palace, Velthari citizens began to treat humans differently. Where before they had viewed them as fragile and expendable, now there was curiosity, even admiration. Tales of Elias' bravery spread through every district. Children told each other stories of the human who had faced impossible odds and refused to fall. Adults whispered about how he had saved their lives, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The Queen herself began to walk among her people with Elias at her side. She introduced him to families, to scholars, to military commanders. She saw their reactions, fear slowly replaced by hope, respect replaced by inspiration, and everywhere people asked the same question: how could a being so small and fragile face so much and still stand? It was a question she could not answer. One cycle later, the Korthal Dominion attempted one final attack. They sent a small fleet to Veltharis Prime, hoping to destabilize the Empire and capture or kill Elias. Unlike previous attacks, this one was calculated and ruthless. Their ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, weapons primed, boarding crafts ready. But the Velthari were ready. Not just the fleet, but the people themselves. Thanks to Elia's influence, every district had volunteers trained in basic defense. Every citizen knew evacuation routes, communication signals, and safe zones. Guards had learned to rely not only on orders, but on coordination and trust, and Elias led them all. The human soldier moved through the command center as though he had been born for this moment. He spoke to officers calmly, giving advice and adjustments. He did not shout. He did not demand. He suggested, pointed out vulnerabilities, and encouraged those who faltered. The Korthal fleet opened fire and chaos erupted in the skies. Explosions lit the horizon. Ships tumbled, some destroyed instantly, others damaged. The Velthari fleet counterattacked with precision, but it was the human-inspired strategies that made the difference. Small squadrons used misdirection and traps, evacuation succeeded, and civilian casualties remained minimal. On the ground, Elias led teams of standers, Velthari guards, and volunteers into zones where boarding teams had breached. They moved with coordination humans and Velthari had never seen before. Trust guided their actions. Courage drove them forward. And when the enemy underestimated them, the humans struck decisively, never reckless, never arrogant, always calculated. During the final engagement, a massive Korthal strike cruiser descended upon the central district. Its weapons threatened to wipe out the city's core. Without hesitation, Elias boarded a shuttle with a small team. They maneuvered through defenses, bypassing automated turrets and enemy patrols, reaching the cruiser's control center. Inside, the Korthal officers were confident. A human could never survive this environment. But Elias moved swiftly, disabling critical systems, rerouting energy, and creating a controlled overload that forced the cruiser to retreat. Every step of the way, he faced direct fire and near-fatal traps, yet he advanced. When the cruiser finally fled, the citizens and soldiers of Veltharis Prime cheered. For the first time, they saw not a ruler enforcing order, not a fleet executing maneuvers, but a single human whose courage had changed the course of an entire battle. Elias collapsed afterward, exhausted, his body battered from months of sustained conflict. Queen Zalara found him, kneeling beside him as she had so many times before, but this time her expression was different. Gratitude was there, yes, but also awe. "You've done what no Velthari could," she said softly. "You've shown us a new way to be strong." Elias looked up at her, faintly smiling despite the blood and sweat on his face. "You already knew it," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." The queen shook her head. "No, I've ruled for centuries and I thought strength meant control, fear, power. You've taught me it's something different: choice, bravery, courage in the face of impossible odds." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. "It's what humans do. We face what we must, even if we fail." "That's all." "Then you are no longer just a human soldier," the queen said. "You are a symbol." The words did not make him proud. He did not seek symbols or fame, yet he understood. Symbols had power, sometimes more than weapons, sometimes more than empires. And he had become one by simply standing. Weeks later, Veltharis Prime began a new era. Laws changed to encourage unity, training, and voluntary service instead of blind obedience. Citizens worked together, sharing resources and defending their neighborhoods. Nobles learned humility. Soldiers learned to value each life they protected. and the story of a human soldier who had refused to fall became part of the culture itself, a story told in schools, training halls, and at family dinners. Queen Zalara continued to rule, but differently now. She walked among her people openly, consulting with advisors and volunteers alike, often seeking Elia's counsel. The Velthari Empire had survived countless threats, but none had changed it so profoundly as one small, stubborn human who refused to kneel. Elias did not remain forever. After months of service and teaching, he returned to the humans' distant colonies. But the impact of his presence remained. The standards became permanent, an elite group trained to defend the empire, guided by the principles he had taught. Civilians continued to speak of him with respect, teaching children that courage and compassion were as important as strength. Long after Elias left Veltharis Prime, the queen would look out across her empire and remember a human soldier standing alone in a corridor of fire, refusing to move, refusing to surrender. That image stayed with her because it represented a truth no power could ever erase. The measure of a being is not in size, weapons, or authority. It is in the courage to act when all seems lost. The galaxy remembered Elia's ward not as a conqueror, not as a ruler, not even as a hero in the traditional sense. They remembered him as proof. Proof that humanity, though small and fragile, could shape the fates of entire civilizations with bravery, selflessness, and unwavering choice. And for Queen Zalara, the lesson was unforgettable. No matter the power of her empire, no matter the fear of her enemies, no Velthari could match what she had witnessed in a human soldier. The kind of courage that silences empires, changes hearts, and leaves even a queen speechless. The stars were vast, the universe dangerous, but humanity had already shown its place among them, not by force alone, but by standing, enduring, and inspiring. And with that, a new era began, not just for Velthari, not just for humans, but for all who had the courage to face the impossible and choose to rise.